Are you an adventurer looking to take your hunt to the next level? Then you're in the right place. Welcome to East Meets West Hunt with your host, Bo Martonic.
Hey everyone, happy April Fool's Day. So already into April here. Can't believe the month of March flew by so quickly. And got some more time out in the woods this weekend. Hope that everyone else got to do the same. It was beautiful here in Pennsylvania. And finally came across an elk shed. So went out with my buddy Michael Palladino, who was on the podcast here before. And we were looking at going out. He was going to go out whitetail shed hunting, and I was looking at going and look for some elk sheds, and he's like, oh, maybe I'll go with you. And he goes, there's this area on a map I've always wanted to check out. Do you want to go take a look at it? And I said, yeah, let's do it. And so basically, kind of throwing a dart at the map there, and we met up in the morning, 7 o'clock in the morning. He had a 2.5 hour drive there, and got to the bottom and where we were going to park at, and realized that the hike right to the top was 1,200 vertical feet of straight up, a little over a mile to do that. And it was a pretty grueling climb to warm up your legs, if you will, in the morning. But we got all the way up to the top, and there was zero sign of humans anywhere, which is unreal for the amount of people that are out elk shed hunting right now. And within, I don't know, 20 minutes of being on top, maybe less, we just had split up, and Michael yells that he found one. And so he found a fresh drop off of a bull that actually, with one of the little kickers, and if the one tine hadn't been broken, would have been 8 on one side. So he found that, and originally it almost looked like it might have been an older shed because all the tips of the antlers were chewed off, but we picked it up and looked, and the bases were bloody. And so, I mean, they were really bloody. The bull definitely dropped them in the last 24 hours, and in that short amount of time, porcupines had got to them and started chewing on them already. So that was kind of interesting. But we weren't able to match up the other side, whether the bull was still carrying it or we just didn't stumble upon it. But did a lot of scouting, looking for some more elk sign, and then really got in whitetail mode and started. There were some really like thin spine ridges and points that we checked, and we walked out on this one point, and it was just this beautiful view of a whole bunch of different basins and everything else. And we sat there and ate lunch, and we were kind of laughing to ourselves about how we're not the best at finding whitetail sheds. I said, oh, if my dad would have been here, he would have found 5 or 6 by now. And as we said that, Michael looks over and goes, there's one. And so we run over to it, and like 2 feet away, I said, there's another one. I grab it and thought it was a match. Well, it was actually the same bucks left side from the year before. So there's 2 of the same sheds from the same deer from 2 different years in the same bed out on this point. And then Michael turns around and finds another one from the year before that. So we had 3 different years of antlers off of one buck in one bed, which is, I've never seen that happen before, and frankly, it's probably just straight luck. But either way, it was really cool to do that. And those were the only sheds we found the rest of the day. Put on a little over 10 miles and covered some country. Found some turkey sign. It was a really, really good day out in the Pennsylvania wild. So awesome time there. But so on this week's podcast, we have a couple gentlemen from the state of Washington coming on, and some guys I met in the backcountry of Colorado in 2017, I believe. Great guys. I think it's going to be a real good podcast there. So, and before I get into the partners here, do not forget that Colorado's application deadline is April 2nd. So tomorrow will be the deadline, and you have to, for elk, mule deer, sheep, goat, moose, that application deadline is tomorrow. So 8 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. It does not go till midnight this year, so take note of that. And so my strategy is going to be going to Colorado. I'm applying for points. I'm not going to try to draw a tag. I had originally thought about, cashing in my couple points on an elk tag, but I think I'm gonna save them and just apply for points. So that's kind of my strategy there. And just a note with Colorado this year, you are required to buy a hunting license that's non-refundable with your application this year, which is big. That's a big deal, which could, help draw odds because people aren't just going to buy, point for, I can't remember what the price was to buy points before, but you got all the money back basically besides a small application fee. But now with the cheapest license you can buy is $81, and that's a small game license. No matter what, you're paying $81 plus the price of the points. And so that's going to keep some people out of it. And I mean, for good reason. Colorado is an interesting state where to draw their top units, if you're just starting out putting in for points, you'll probably never catch that because of what they call point creep. With point creep being, basically they're giving out the tags to the people with the most points. Well, there's so many people in that top, bracket there of points, and say only one tag given out in certain units, that they're just never, they just keep putting in every year, and you'll never catch up to that, which is sad. So a strategy that I'm kind of looking at is I'm not going to let my points get up over probably 5 would probably be the max that I'm gonna build up before I cash them in on a good unit. There's not any great units. I think you can put your money in some other states that have a better chance with if you're gonna build points. But a couple points, I'm gonna, like I said, gonna keep building them up. And mule deer, I really want to get into some high country mule deer and early season archery, but I haven't been able to find the time to do that yet. It's on my bucket list. I just think I'd really enjoy that. And Colorado is one of those states that produces the best mule deer, arguably in the country. I mean, if you look at the record books, they're in the top of that. But even more so, with just opportunity and the type of experience that I'm looking for with a high country hunt. So that's kind of the scoop on Colorado there. Like I said, don't forget, apply. And with that being said, we'll get into the partners here. So University of Elk Hunting, Elk 101, and Corey Jacobson, they have put together a course, an online course that fully encompasses everything about elk hunting, from the planning phases through the fitness, through the gear, everything else to packing out your bowl. It goes into all of that. No matter what your experience level is, the University of Elk Hunting can really help you out. Been doing that now. This will be my 4th year of buying that membership. Would highly recommend it to anybody. And Corey has offered a discount code to any of the East Meets West listeners. So if you enter code East Meets West at checkout, you'll save yourselves $20 on the online course, which is an annual course. So check that out if you're looking at planning an elk hunt, and let me know your thoughts on it. Another partner of the podcast would be Heather's Choice. So Heather has come out with a series of meals and snacks for adventuring, hunting, hiking, camping, and what I've used it a lot doing recently is traveling. So a healthy dehydrated option that's gluten-free, dairy-free, great meals that taste good, give you high calories and proteins and fats rather than filling it with a ton of carbs and sugars. So your body performs really well. The biggest thing that I've noticed from it is not being sore at the end of the day when I'm providing my body with the right amount of fuel. So what they're going to do for the listeners here, for you guys, they're going to give out free shipping on any orders over $99. So if you enter code East Meets West at checkout, you get free shipping on any order over $99. If your total isn't over $99, please still go to the website and use the link that I have under the partners page. Just click on that, and that'll direct you to the website, and it'll help track, myself and being able to show that, that you heard about Heather's Choice or checked it out from the podcast. And lastly, Maven Optics. So Maven has created the highest quality glass on the market for a price that's half of their competitors. So up against like Swarovski, Leica, Zeiss, those top high-end binoculars, they've been able to bring it out at half the price from their business model of direct-to-consumer. The biggest thing with Mavens that I've liked is their low light clarity, and I have some videos that I've posted online of examples of using it when it's basically dark out as I'm glassing the high country, and you look through the binoculars and it's still like you have 20 minutes left of light. So really cool to be able to check that out. And so Maven is offering a free gift that will change periodically on a monthly basis. That gift will change. But if you enter the code EastMeetsWest-gift at checkout on any full price optics orders, you'll get a free gift with that. So check them out. They have stock lines and also fully customizable lines with a variety of price ranges that'll go anywhere from $200 on up. So there's something to fit your budget in there, and full lifetime no fault warranty. All right. With that being said, let's get into the podcast here, and I think you guys will really enjoy this one. Some good information on spring bear hunting and just adventure hunting as we know it, as well as these guys coming out with a pretty awesome book here. So the guys, I guess the last thing I'll say here is Team Bad Decision. Their book is releasing here, and they're going to offer a couple different free ebooks out to the listeners here. So we're going to pay attention to the social media platform for the one way of winning. So if you follow East Meets West Hunt and Team Bad Decision, they will be posting how you can win that. And also the other way that you can win an ebook is any purchase in the month of April of East Meets West apparel from my website is entered to win, and I'll be giving that out at the end of the month. So, all right, guys, enjoy the podcast here, and as always, let me know what you think of it, good or bad. Thanks. All right, welcome back to another episode of the East Meets West Hunt podcast, and I have two guys on the line here coming from the completely opposite side of the United States over in the beautiful state of Washington. So Travis Greenwood and Scott Daniels, what's going on, gentlemen?
Hey, Bo, how's it going?
Oh, pretty
How you
good.
doing, Bo?
Doing well, Scott. Doing well. It's just, it's a little after 9 here where I'm at, and you guys are just getting home from work, right?
Yep, 6:30 or so.
Gotcha. Cool. Well, I'm excited to have both of you on the podcast here. As after we get into the introductions here, we'll kind of go into the story of how we met, and everything, which is a pretty interesting story at that, and the fact that we were able to, stay in contact with each other afterwards is pretty cool.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So let's start off, Travis, with you, if you don't mind, going into who you are and a little bit of your background here.
Awesome. Like I said, thanks for having us on, Bo.
Yeah, no problem.
So I am a married father of 2 boys who keep me pretty busy, and I started hunting when I was pretty little. I did a lot of waterfowl and upland hunting with my dad growing up, and we didn't really do a lot of big game hunting as a family. And so after I went to college, I had a couple of buddies who were pretty into it, and it was kind of a big attraction for me. And so I started joining one of their hunting camps, and ended up killing my first bull and killing a buck. And after that, started kind of getting a desire to hunt further from the road, kind of hunting the alpine. And that's when Scott and I ended up meeting in 2012. And from there, that's kind of how our story kind of came to be, and we've been hunting together and traveling all over the West ever since.
Nice. What about you, Scott?
Well, I'm a new dad. My daughter's only 8 months old now, so it's been a rough year as far as hunting is concerned, but it's been rewarding. Like most things that are challenging. I'm a diesel mechanic for work, so the company that I work for, luckily, all of them are hunters. All my bosses, so they have allowed me a lot of time. So having worked there is when it really started to give me the time to get out and hunt more and explore. I didn't grow up in a hunting family, so it's something I kind of took to on my own, and it's been a long road. I never really had anyone to show me, so everything was lots of trial and lots of error to finally start to get anything right. Then Travis and I met, and that's when my backcountry journey really started. You know, the two of us just kind of got into it. It just really spiraled out of control from there.
Yeah, that's funny. So how did you two meet, I guess?
Online.
Oh, really?
How all good relationships start, right? These days, right?
Would you swipe right?
All right. No, we met on the Rock Slide forum.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
There was a bunch of people that we got together for like some workouts and hikes and stuff like that, and just kind of from there, everybody else got out a hunting partner, and Scott and I were both flailing around blindly, and so we decided to flail around blindly together.
Oh, that's interesting. I honestly just, without knowing any background, just thought that you guys were like childhood friends and grew up together.
No, we met in 2012.
Huh. Well, that's interesting. And then you guys came to Rock Slide from just wanting to start, broadening your horizon with hunting?
Yeah, we'd both kind of been delving into lots of gear research and trying to find out how to find good areas, like what to look for when targeting elk and deer in the wilderness, and gear reviews, and just general banter and just learning. In the early days, Rock Slide was a fantastic resource. I mean, not that it's not now, but it was a small group compared to now, and a lot of the people that were really active on it were just so full of information.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I didn't come to Rock Slide until probably 2015-ish. So I was a little behind the game, which I still learned a whole lot from that forum. But from what I hear, I've heard from a couple other people a similar story to what you guys said, is it was, the resource, 6-8 years ago. But
yeah, without a doubt.
Yeah, that's cool. That's awesome that works out, and I'm sure that's a gamble, getting into, especially backpack style backcountry hunts together with someone that you really don't know, because it's definitely something that's not for the faint of heart when it comes to, you got to be able to get along with each other, and you kind of see everyone's true colors once you get back in there for a few days.
It's funny. We've run into that on both sides of the coin, where you experience hardship with someone in the backcountry, and it either kind of galvanizes you or just totally drives you apart. And we've been on both sides of that. Not the two of us, but in having brought along other people, we've always been pretty open to inviting people or anyone that's interested. Like, yeah, sure, let's put a trip together, and we'll try and get you lined out and help any way we can. And there's a couple people that everything just meshed up, and it's like they were just part of the team, and by the time you come off the mountain, you're like family. And then there's other people that, right away, either they don't want to come back because it just wasn't their cup of tea, or maybe you don't want to give them a return invite because they just didn't have the mindset for it, or just drama, or insert, a number of reasons that you encounter on the mountain.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting. I mean, I remember even my first trip going out and with my brother and my cousin. I think I was that guy that you didn't want to go with as far as like, it was such an eye opener for me. I would get, after 4 or 5 days, I got to the point where I caught myself just being snippy and just being, just straight asshole at times. And it took me realizing that to really kind of change it. And the more I got comfortable with everything and getting to know, my boundaries and how I am when I push them, then I'd like to think that, I'm not that person anymore. So I've been invited back with people more than once. So I guess I didn't do a terrible job, but
Scott and I have spent, a couple of different trips over 30 hours in a tent together, weathering out storms. And so it's important to be able to, to be able to live in proximity with other people for a long time in the backcountry. Because, like you said, it can galvanize you and break you apart. And nobody wants to be sitting inside of a tent while there's thunder, lightning, hail, and snow and not be happy with your situation.
Yeah, no, that's fair. That's definitely fair to say there. So I kind of want to get into here how we met. And I was just telling the story to someone else earlier today when I was talking about having you guys on the podcast here. So we happened to hunt the same area in Colorado, and it was my second year out there. I was down in this I call it a valley or a little sub drainage, I guess, coming off there, and I was down in there bugling, just kind of walking through. And I'd got into elk the day before in this one spot, and I got down in there, and I heard a bugle way up behind me, and I'm like, do you think that's a person, on the trail? And I'm like, I don't know. That sounds like it could be someone on that could be an elk on that side hill. So I start working my way back up, trying to keep the wind in my favor, doing all this. I'm bugling back. The elk, supposed elk was, bugling back at me, and we're just, just cutting each other off, and and really sounded like this bull was fired up. I'm out of breath, running back up the mountain, trying to, get up to this bull, and I get in a position where I'm like, I should be able to see him. Like, he's got to be at 40 yards or so, and then I see a flash of a hat brim. And I realized that it's, another hunter. And then the calling was coming from behind it. And so then I waved my arms and, walked over, and it ended up being Scott. And then I think it was you, Travis, that was up behind doing the calling, if I remember right.
Yeah, I was up behind calling, and I remember being so mad at Scott because I thought he couldn't see the bull, because I could hear you walking down below, and I couldn't see you yet. And Scott was kind of standing there like, because he had already made eye contact with you, obviously. And I remember just waving my arms at him going, don't you hear that? He's coming right up the trail. Get ready, get ready. And apparently my elk was not quite as big as I anticipated.
No. It was an immature bull, that's for sure.
He was so mad. If he would have had his way, you would have took a broadhead.
Well, I appreciate that you didn't, Scott. Oh man, it was so funny though. I walked up to you guys and I was so pissed at the same time, but it was funny. And then we just, as soon as we started talking there, and then it didn't take too long to get into gear talk and everything else. And I could tell Scott, you for one are really into testing different gear and everything when you were asking me about my pack, and we just started, bullshitting there for a little while. And it was funny though, because we both had said we had never seen another hunter in that little valley there, and it wasn't a spot that was ridiculously far from the road or anything. It was just kind of tough to get down into, and just super thick with blowdowns and dark timber and everything. But it definitely held elk, and we still think that there might have been an actual bull in there too, because we heard another bugle, but never ended up finding out if there was or not. Yeah. But
and I don't think, and that was the trip. We really struggled that year in particular in that area, and we didn't see a bull till day 6. Was that, Scott?
Yeah.
And that was the only elk we saw the whole trip. And unfortunately, he was a really nice bull, and the wind just caught us wrong. And it was when I think the wind was blowing like 30 or 40 miles an hour, and we couldn't really identify his bugle. We were thinking, is that an elk over that hill? Is that an elk? And we poked our head up, and then the wind switched around, and that was that. But that was the only elk we saw in that whole trip, which was very abnormal for that area.
He was number 2 bull that we've ever seen in there too.
Jeez.
Yeah, second biggest, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and it's probably the bull that I screwed up on twice in that valley I ran into you guys the 2 days before that. Or actually, I think maybe even that morning that I ran into you was my second encounter. It was it was a giant 6x6. From my perspective, it was big. And I ran into him right where I ran into you guys the day before. All he would do was chuckle. And then I ended up, the cows he was with spotted me, and they took off. And then the next morning, I caught him. It was just getting daylight, and he was heading back up to bed. And I just shadowed the herd as he was, bugling, and caught up. And he went through one of my supposed shooting lanes, I guess if you want to call it, across one of the avalanche chutes at about 30 yards or so, and when he hit the little window I wasn't ready. I didn't think that he was going to go the route that he did. If he would have followed the cows, I had the cows perfect at 25 yards and the wide open. But of course, they don't always do the same thing. But they,
actually, that's the only thing you can count on elk to do is do exactly opposite of what they should do.
Yeah, that's for sure. And I just know that bull is super impressive. I mean, and the thing is, he never would actually bugle. He just kept chuckling. It was really cool to see that. And when I do it back at him, he would just get so fired up. And my calling is very subpar at best, but when it seemed like whenever you mimic what they were doing like that, and if they're in the right mood, they get pretty angry with you back. But yeah, so that bull, he was super impressive, but I don't know, I probably kicked him out of the valley at that point, and then ended up running into a 5x5, and where I think I don't know if we saw you guys again walking through there, if it was my dad that said he saw you, but where a whole bunch of wallows were there on the bottom of those cliffs. I was just sitting there one afternoon. I just took a break, and I was going to take a nap there and just sit there. I'm like, I always saw on TV you sit by a wallow and elk comes in. Never thought that would actually be the case, and had a 5x5 down there throwing mud all over himself, and I called him right into 12 yards, but I thought he was trying to go circle me for my wind, and I moved when I shouldn't have, and I put myself in a position where I wasn't set up ideal. And when he came in, he stopped looking right where I was before, and he was behind some limbs, and I couldn't get a shot, and he just kind of spooked and took off. But yeah, I had a lot of action there the days leading up to meeting you guys, but you guys didn't come in until that was your first day in, I believe, wasn't it?
Yeah. So those meadows and wallows that you're talking about, our very first year hunting in there was like 2014, and we hunted the very first days of the season. So we hiked in the day before the season, and we were way up on the top of the main ridge up there at like 12.5, and we were watching all the way down in those meadows, and there was a handful of elk down there, like wallowing and bedded, and some smaller bulls just kind of sparring around and bugling, and we just had to sit there all afternoon and all night watching those elk.
Really?
Yeah.
It was the day before season, so there's nothing.
Yeah.
we couldn't do anything. So
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah, we had to wait for opening day the next day.
That small lake that's to the north of the inbound trail. You know the one I'm talking about?
Yep, I do.
That same trip, we saw what was it, about 6-8 cows splash around in that thing, Trav?
Totally. Yep. Just right in the middle of the lake where you can camp down there.
And is that the popular lake that has the name that people would recognize if we would say it, but we're not going to?
100%.
Yeah, that's the one.
That's
Yep.
the one, yeah.
Yep, that's the one where the first year I was in there in 2016. we had two bulls standing right on the side of it with a few cows of the lake drinking out of it. And we just walked up to the lake like, oh, this is beautiful. I've seen this in photos before. And I look over and there they are on the other side of the lake. I was like, how, that in the hell, this is a popular camping spot for hikers, hunters, everything else. And they're just chilling there by the lake. And then we ended up, we didn't spook them that bad and got on them and they were, bugling back and forth. But again, not knowing how to set up on them the first year like that, I just kind of screwed it up. But
there's just a lot of elk in Colorado. I mean, period.
Yeah.
There's just a lot of elk there.
Yeah, a lot of hunters too.
A lot of hunters. Yeah.
And it seemed to change from 2016 to 17 when I ran into you guys, ran into so many other hunters. And then again, I went back to the same spot here in just 2018. And I went out earlier and I was talking to you guys and you guys just gave me some amazing, information on, hunting that early on. I got in there, I think August 31st. And, you're like, oh man, the high country, it was filled with elk when we went that time of year, everything else. And it just, the dry summer that they had, the elk weren't up there. All the feed in the high country was brown instead of being green. And you just walk and it felt like it was like it could catch on fire at any moment because it just crunched, beneath you. And the elk just weren't in there. And it's amazing, year to year how things like that can change.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so that was, but anyways, that was just a cool story that I met you guys and I don't think we really even exchanged last names or anything. And then I was like, man, I wish I would have got their guys' full names. I want to look them up on Facebook. And then all of a sudden I got a friend request from Scott and I recognized them. I was like, oh, that's awesome. He was able to find me on here and we've stayed connected ever since, really.
I think Travis will vouch for me. My stalker skills are strong.
If you didn't say that, I was going to make that comment. Yeah, they're pretty extensive.
That's impressive. I'm glad you did because it's cool to be able to talk after that. And like I said, you guys gave me some amazing intel, going into, this year and everything, and definitely helpful. And it's cool to be able to help each other out as far as that goes.
Oh, definitely.
But yeah, so that was like I said, that was pretty cool to get to meet you guys that way. And when I met you and as we were sitting there just kind of BSing on the side of the mountain, you guys were telling me about, you're like, if you ever want a really cool hunt, you need to come to Washington in the spring to hunt bears. And that's kind of your guys' forte, isn't it?
Yeah, Scott will say it's not his favorite hunt because hunting elk in the rut is pretty cool. But it's my favorite hunt. I love hunting spring bear, and Washington is a little different than a lot of the other western states. Like Idaho has got over the counter, and Washington's all draw, and so sometimes it can be a little difficult for out of state guys to come do a spring hunt in Washington just because you've got to pay the out of state bear tags every year, and it's not a guarantee. Though you could come back in the fall and hunt bear, which is just as fun. But yeah, spring hunting is a pretty fun hunt.
Yeah. And
now, despite me not owning up to it being my favorite hunt, and this is something that the book project really made me reflect on, is that I've taken years off from hunting mule deer or hunting elk to focus on things, or just because an out of state elk hunt wasn't feasible that year, or any number of excuses you want to say. I hunted spring bear for the first time in 2012, and even the couple years that I haven't drawn a tag or at least known someone that's had a tag, I have spent time in the woods chasing bears with a camera. I have not missed a spring in the woods since my very first year in 2012.
Yep.
Okay, and so I'm actually looking at a picture right now that Travis had sent me of the country that you guys are hunting bear in. I have it just pulled up on my computer screen here. It looks like some extremely rugged country and beautiful country at that.
Yeah, that would be an understatement. I think it is rough country, and people can be pretty intimidated. And I've watched people pull up to the trailhead with tags, look in, and turn around and go home. Just because it's huge, sweeping canyons, and it's big, tough country that not a lot of people spend time in. It's really hard on gear. We always, between the two of us, we lose at least one piece of gear to wear and tear every time we go in there, and that's not an exaggeration. Whether it's the mice or the rocks or whatever, it just beats you up in there. But it's pretty awesome for those exact same reasons too.
Gotcha. What time of year? I know it's in the spring, but when does your bear season typically open?
April 15th every year.
Gotcha. So that's coming up here in a little over a month and a half here.
Yeah, we're about probably 2 or 3 weeks out from draw results.
Gotcha. And that's something. Yeah, Travis has been saying. He's like, man, he goes, you need to put it on your schedule here, or at least have, keep it open to, potentially draw one of these bear tags some year. He goes, it's a blast to get to do that.
I feel like it's the only hunt that we can really offer you that would be enjoyable and we're kind of skilled at, so that we could come there and kill large whitetails at some point.
Hey, you're always welcome to come out and hunt whitetails with me. I can't say I'm going to be able to guarantee you anything, but we could have a good time doing it, and some different country in the Appalachian region, super thick. You're not most of the time seeing further than 80 yards away from you, but it can be a really cool style hunt. We can come out. You guys can come out. We could do a backpack hunt. We can camp at a trail somewhere. We can camp in a cabin. We can do whatever the hell we want, really.
Cabin sounds great.
Yeah, we have a fridge there. We can put some beer and everything else in it, and make it nice and easy.
We hunt hard the rest of the year. We're due one of those hunts, right?
It's funny. Like when I go to work and I was talking to my boss the one day, and he's like, you do a lot of these hunts that are really difficult. Have you ever thought about, just doing something that's, enjoyable, like a hog hunt or something else? And I think he was referring to the fact that I always come back with a story that I didn't kill anything. But I was like, you know what, that would be nice. Maybe I should start adding one of them into my hunts during the year.
The thing about spring that's really cool is the area that we hunt is almost untouched by traffic and human influence. This last year we didn't have a tag, but we went anyway just because we'd already booked some time off work, so we cut it a couple days short. But we went for 4 days, Trav?
Yeah, 4 days.
So we were camped near a big 3 creek confluence. And there's a spot where you have to cross that anyone that comes that far up the drainage has to walk through. So we tamped all the mud down nice and smooth. When we finally came back to it, there were still no boot tracks in it.
Really?
Yeah.
That was after we had been gone for 14, 15. Well, it was the next morning, right? We did it in the morning. We were gone all the way down, came back in the dark. And then the next morning we had got up and nobody had come through in the previous 24 hours. Right. And so we had that whole, probably 10 square miles of country to ourselves.
That's awesome.
During season, and we didn't have a tag. And so there's just not that many tags, and over 50% of them go unhunted, actually, for various reasons. So, or unreported.
That just sounds like a sweet hunt to be able to do, and the fact that, and again, that it doesn't really get talked about a whole lot. Spring bear hunting is becoming more popular, and you see people, the guys that are, I guess, working in the industry, if you want to say it, they're doing different hunts in Montana and Idaho and places like that, but you never really hear Washington come up so much. And I guess you can probably contribute a lot of that to the drawing tags, as you were saying.
Yeah, I think most people focus. You hear a lot of guys hunting spring bears in Idaho, and we're actually looking at planning a spring bear hunt in Idaho, just so we can continue to hunt when we don't drop, because we want to have an opportunity, obviously, to harvest an animal, and that doesn't happen every year in Washington. So, as far as drawing, I mean, but
yeah. So if you can kind of describe the country that you have in Washington, and is that close to where you guys live at?
yeah, it's closer to where I live as opposed to Scott. So Washington, a lot of people, especially probably back east, don't know. They think about Washington and they think that we are all, it's the rainy state and it's the evergreens and whatnot. But actually half of our state and half of Oregon is all desert. And so it's kind of 50-50 split, where you've got the evergreens on the coast, and the whole eastern half of Oregon and Washington are all desert. And so you can get some different types of spring hunts actually in Washington, where you've got really thick timber versus really open hillsides versus clear cuts. And so there's kind of a variety of different types of spring hunts that you can get into out here.
I gotcha. And so, like, as far as most of the places, like, you would hunt bears, is it more of like big timber, like you're saying, like a lot of fir trees, things like that? Or are you hunting burned areas, logging cuts? Any specifics kind of there?
So and I'm sure Scott can speak to this as well, because we've hunted some different areas for spring. The area that we typically tend to go is a lot of big sweeping canyons, where you've got a mixture of timber and open grass hillsides and whatnot. And a lot of those bears they don't really do a full hibernation in Washington. They just kind of get lethargic for 6 weeks to 2 months or so. And when they come out, they're just cruising for grass and for onions and for elk calves and whatnot. And so a lot of our strategy is kind of boring, to be honest. It's get really high and look for bears. And so we try to give ourselves a vantage point where we can see upwards of 2 to 2.5 miles and try to spot them and move into a position to have a shot.
Gotcha. Scott, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, so my first couple of years, I hunted the western part of the state, and it's a challenging hunt. I started putting in there. I'd never hunted spring bear before, and there was the place I was living at the time. There was an open unit that was like 4 miles from my house. So the first year I ate my tag, but I learned a lot. And then the next year, I drew on a partner tag, and we filled 2 tags in a unit that is about a 2.5% success rate. So I feel like I learned a lot. And then that was about enough of that for me, and we decided to start hunting the east side of the state. Hunting in the logging country is tough. You either got to just drive around and cover a lot of ground and check clear cuts, or drive around or walk around until you get into thick sign, and then slowly start creeping around overgrown old grades, grassy roads, stuff like that. And so really you're doing a lot of walking, hoping to see an animal, as opposed to looking over a lot of country and seeing animals and then deciding how to make a move.
Mm-hmm. And so that sounds like you were kind of Travis was kind of describing it as somewhat boring to talk about as far as just getting up high and glassing. But I think that's such a cool component to it, and I think that's what makes me want to spring bear hunt. I've never done just strict glassing, spot and stalk style, and I feel like that if I could picture a bear hunt, that's what my picture perfect bear hunt would be.
I think that I think it was, I can't remember who, I think it was an Alaskan guide anyway, that said bear hunting is like 90% boredom and like 10% adrenaline overload.
Yeah.
And I think that's pretty accurate, because you climb up, you got to walk a bunch of miles, you climb up high. It's in the spring, especially, the weather's really dicey. That's what's kind of nice about summer bear hunting, or early fall bear hunting for us. Our season is usually open in August and early September, and that's like shorts and t-shirt hunting. Whereas like spring is, you got to bring a tarp to shelter under, because it's gonna snow and rain and do all sorts of things on you all day long.
Gotcha.
I mean, I think during Scott's got to draw on a spring tag in 2017. And we started the day, it was like 64 degrees, and we were in T-shirts. And by 2 o'clock or 1 o'clock or so, it was we had every piece of clothing we had on. We were sheltered up underneath the tarp, and we had an inch of snow on the ground.
That's crazy.
It could change fast.
Like you were saying, hard on the gear.
That's not atypical either. That's the norm. The only thing you can count on for that weather is for it to be all over the board. 4 seasons in one day.
But it's cool. I mean, we typically, I think if we were to go on a 4-day trip, it's not uncommon to see 6 to 12 bears in 4 days. And I think that's being pretty generous. I think it would not be uncommon to see more, especially in some, as we've gotten better at hunting this area, we just see more and more bears every time we go out. I mean, Scott had alluded to, we didn't have a tag last year, and we still went in, and we were drinking all night, sleeping in, napping on the side of the mountain, and not really hunting that hard. And we still saw 3 really nice bears in 2.5 days, basically. And they're just everywhere if you get out and look for them. And it's a lot of bears are a cool animal to get out and hunt and to watch. They're just neat. So
you get to watch bears just be bears. Especially in this area where you can glass bears 2,000 yards away and just put them in the glass and just sit there and just watch them just do their thing.
Mm-hmm. And it's funny, like, so I've grown up around bears my whole life. I mean, Pennsylvania has some of the biggest black bears in the country, but we don't see them very often. I mean, I spend a lot of time in the woods, and I rarely see bears. Even though there's a lot of them, my trail cameras show that there's a ton of them from them breaking lenses out and knocking them off the trees and everything else. But we don't have that ability to glass and see, far distances and everything else. And so I don't get to see bears be bears, except for, when I was in Colorado the year that I ran into you guys. I think, I can't remember the exact number. I want to say it was somewhere around 17 bears that we saw, and it could have been, some of them were repeats, but 17 different sightings, I guess, of bear, and it was so cool. And I didn't have a bear tag at the time, which got one the next year and spent 14 days there and never saw a bear, but nonetheless, it was so cool just to watch them do their thing. And just watching them feeding and just kind of how they, like you said, Scott, bears being bears,
Well, and I think, Bo, you've got about 5 hours left to buy your spring bear application for Washington if you want still. So it closes tonight at midnight, I think. So
does it really?
Yeah.
Oh man, how much does like a bear tag, or to apply? How much does that cost?
I think is it about 2.5, Scott?
I think it's more than that. All of our out-of-state tags are really expensive.
Yeah, it's hard because you can't, as a non-resident, you can't just apply for the tag and then buy the tag if you draw. You've got to buy a tag in order to apply, and so that turns off a lot of out-of-state residents to Washington.
Gotcha. That makes sense on why. And is it that way across the board with other species as well?
Except for the oil tags, they're moose, goat, and sheep, which there's a lot of, that causes a lot of irritation, I think, among residents on that, because then it inflates the once-in-a-lifetime tags. But it's not like that in other states. I mean, other states allow you to apply across the board. Colorado, I think Colorado actually just changed their rules this year, if I read that correctly, where we don't have to front the money anymore like we used to. Is that true?
Yeah, there was just another change. Last year they changed it where you didn't need to front the money. Like, I applied for sheep and goat and moose for $3 a piece, and now they changed those application fees up. I'm not going to speak on the exact numbers, but they're a decent amount more. But I still don't think you need to front the license tag anymore, which inflates the numbers. I've seen it already with. I've been putting points for elk in Colorado, and there's this one unit I've had, that I've been wanting to hunt, and I just realized that even this year getting an additional point, still not even a year closer to drawing. It made it inflated, the point creep there a little bit, but
yeah, that's a big topic all in itself, talking about the point creep. And And I don't know if there's a good solution to it, to be honest with you. But
No.
there's too many hunters and not enough tags, and it's a tough system, tough to get it right.
Yeah, no, that's for sure. But so I got 5 hours to apply, basically.
So, in the meantime, while you guys have been talking, I just looked for you. It's $222 for an out-of-state, a non-resident bear license, and then the special hunt permit application is $110.
You're looking at $330 then for a bear.
So and if this gives away the area you're in, don't answer it. But what are the odds typically of drawing one of these special tags?
Even as an in-state, as a resident, you're looking anywhere between 2 and 5 years.
Really?
That's pretty common. I mean, most of the spring tags. There's very few spring tags in Washington. And in fact, I don't think any of them really that I would consider a guaranteed draw every year.
There's a couple on the coast, and there's a reason for that.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I gotcha. So it's all random draw. I'm guessing you're not like building points or anything.
No, you build points. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yep. Yeah. So the way the point system works in Washington, I don't know if it's similar across the board, but basically you have your points, and they square that number, and that's the number of lottery tickets you have in the hat or whatever.
Okay, so somewhat like what Montana does.
Yeah, real similar. Yep.
Okay, gotcha. Which is kind of a weird system. I wish all the states would kind of just make it so we could, figure it out. I feel like every year, as I'm trying to broaden my horizon with putting in for tags and building points in places, it takes so much freaking research to try to figure out each state and their system and everything there. I'm in the midst of trying to figure out Utah right now, and it's real fun.
Yep, I will. Well, maybe we'll have to get together and compare notes, because I will be putting in for my tags on Thursday this week for you.
Are you?
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So to contrast this, if you wanted to hunt spring bear in Idaho, especially if you wanted to target one of the areas that's reduced cost non-resident tags, you're all in over the counter for $180.
Oh man, that's not
Do
bad.
that every year. Yep, and do that every year.
Yeah, that's not bad at all. That's definitely manageable. And again, it comes down to whether you have the time at that point, and if you want to, allocate your time from vacation standpoint or, whatever else to be able to do that.
Exactly.
And do you guys? I mean, you're both, working full-time jobs and everything. Do you have pretty generous vacation to be able to take for hunting?
I do. My vacation's pretty generous. I will say though that my wife and kids do like to allocate some of that for their own for their own adventures, and that's important too. We take a couple of family trips every year, and so I usually allocate 2 week-long trips, and then try to get at least 2 or 3 long weekend trips. I work 4/10s, so I can usually leave on a Thursday night and hunt till Sunday. And we've been pretty successful on fall bear doing that, actually.
Huh? That's nice. The 4/10 schedule. That's something that I've always wanted to work. That would really help out. But what about you, Scott? I know you had said earlier that where you work at, everyone is a hunter and everything. Do you have like a set amount of days you can take, or is this something that's kind of flexible?
Yeah, so I get 4 weeks paid vacation, and then occasionally, especially during things like August bear season, I'll do a couple sets of 4/10s here and there. Not as a year long habit, but to make trips work, I'll do that. I've done back-to-back 4/10s to give me a 4-day weekend, but I'm waiting for the time I draw a goat tag or a sheep tag, and and all the guys that I work for will understand that I'm taking a month off straight.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't blame you there. And it's an important topic,
crazy.
Okay, sorry for interrupting. Keep going, Scott.
Oh, so it's actually kind of crazy. It's a family that I work for. There's 3 brothers that are all kind of in charge of the place, and all 3 of them have killed Washington moose.
Really?
Yeah.
Man, that sounds like it'd be good to be in with that family. They got some luck on their side.
I think that maybe they know somebody in the game department or something. No, not really. But.
Yeah, that's funny. And just to go, and the reason why I asked those questions, that with the listeners of the podcast and all of us here on this conversation, we we're regular guys that work full-time jobs and everything, and you guys have more responsibility than I do, as I don't have kids or anything else to or a wife to make happy from that standpoint. But it is something that you have to budget time aside, just as important, if not more, than the money standpoint, to be able to do that. So
yeah, we in my house, it took us a couple years. This will be my 10th. We've been married for 10 years this summer. And it's a ritual every year. I get on my wife about December 20th or so to get the next year's calendar up, because that's how basically I get all my hunts scheduled. Is if it's not on the calendar, it doesn't happen. And so that becomes a joke between my wife and I as we go. And every time a hunt comes up, she claims that was never on the calendar before, and so I try to sneak weekends on and whatnot. But
that's funny. And it's, Scott, you had said something, just to circle back a little bit with the bear hunting. You were saying about, 90% of it is boring, kind of sitting there, and 10%, adrenaline overload. I want to say I heard something really similar on Donnie Vincent's recent film, The Other Side. He had said something about that, and with that's I don't know if you guys have watched it, but a really, really good bear hunting film from that standpoint. And again, this is coming from a guy that has only hunted bears in Pennsylvania, but just it was really cool to see that perspective, and Donnie's an amazing storyteller, so that helps.
I haven't seen it, but I always like his work. I think he does a really, really good job. And it's been on my list. I just haven't gotten to check it out yet.
Yeah, definitely. I would highly recommend it. It's and again, to expect that from him, it's completely different than any other hunting film I've ever watched, and it's just a really, really cool way of highlighting bear hunting and why a lot of people do it, and the reasoning behind that. So you guys, it was spring bear hunting kind of. I know Travis, you touched on a little bit. You'd started with some other, after waterfowl and stuff, started into some big game hunting. But was bear hunting kind of your gateway drug, if you want to say, to wanting to do different backpack style hunts and start to travel?
The first hunt that Scott and I ever went on was a bear hunt, and we were successful 10 minutes into our hunt, and we did not realize how spoiled we were, but it definitely was and I don't know if it was necessarily the bear that was the gateway drug. It was really just being in the alpine and being in a wilderness area that is kind of what we like to do. And it's not that there's more animals, and the farther you don't have to go 15 miles into the wilderness in order to find more animals. But we like to do stuff like that, and that's just kind of what drives us, and more so than the animals that we pursue, it's kind of just the adventures that we take.
I gotcha. When you guys, Colorado, and you said 2014, was that your first out of state, backcountry style hunt?
Yeah,
it was our first out of state hunt in general.
Yeah.
Gotcha. So kind of explain that trip to me, and from the perspective of when you went into this, and how were you thinking of it and planning, what made you decide to do it, to the fact of what did you learn from it? Just kind of describe that experience, I guess.
Well, I would say that despite living here in Washington, where we have over-the-counter elk hunting opportunities every year, the elk hunting here is not great. I think the stat is something like a guy kills an elk once every 10 years on average in Washington. And that's not real great. That's not real acceptable for me to be spending my time. I can camp all year long, but during elk season, I prefer to at least be blowing opportunities rather than just wandering around the woods and not seeing any legal animals. So we started looking at Colorado just because there's over-the-counter opportunities for non-residents and the fact that there's a lot of elk there.
Yeah. No, that's for sure. I mean, Colorado has the most elk in the country as far as in the state.
I think it's even more. It's more drastic than that. I think I looked the stats up one time, and I think that Colorado has more elk in it than Oregon, Washington, and I want to say Idaho combined. It's something crazy like that. I mean, there's just a lot of elk in Colorado. But don't quote me on that, But it was something like that drastic, where it was a couple different states that they had more elk than combined.
I remember looking at the stats, the published numbers for the mountain range that we all hunt there in Colorado, and it was almost equal to. It was like 10,000 elk shy of the estimated amount of elk in all of Washington.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, for that national forest or that mountain range or however it was that they were calculating it. So just a small portion that was, pertinent to us.
Yeah.
Just massive. So we decided to do a scouting trip. And so we did a bonsai flight into Denver, borrowed a car, and drove up. Before this, we did a bunch of Google scouting. We got some intel from some local people and tried to kind of almost disprove it by our own scouting and kind of research and so forth. And we couldn't. We're like, this area looks solid. So we flew out there and checked it out. 4-day trip, pretty low budget, living in a tent, eating Mountain House. And we ended up seeing like 250 elk.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a pretty magical experience, I would say, for us. Like Scott said, coming from Washington, where you just don't see that kind of numbers in an over-the-counter unit. A couple weeks before season. I mean, we were out there in the first week of August, I think, and so it was 3.5 weeks before the season opened, and we were pretty excited, to say the least, after that trip. But
yeah, I would say that your anticipation had to have been at an all-time high.
Yeah, and we didn't even know what we were doing. I mean, we were just stumbling around aimlessly and really learning as we went. And I think, and Scott, we had talked today a little bit in preparation for tonight, and Scott had, I'll lead in for you, Scott, here, but one of Scott's biggest things that he always preaches, especially when guys talk about, how do you plan a hunt out of state? How do you do it? But you just got to go. You just have to, don't make excuses. Don't talk yourself out of it. Pick an area on the map and just go, because it's worth it. I mean, it takes years to learn an area and be successful, and it's a lot of fun.
Yeah. Scott, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I wouldn't. I mean, you obviously got to be a little more specific than pick a spot on a map. But anyone that's considering an out-of-state hunt is going to be able to do enough back research to find a halfway decent area. And really, you should. I mean, pick a few areas and just go. Don't put it off. Don't say, oh, well, I don't have the gear for that, or my fitness, or any excuse that, I need 2-3 years to plan this. If you need 2-3 years to budget it, okay, but it can be done relatively cheap. I think that even that first year where we spent plane tickets and we got a hotel on the drive out there, because it's like 22 hours from my house out there. It was like $1,500, I think. And that includes diesel split 2 ways, non-resident tag. I mean, it's within reach. You just gotta do it. You can't say, you can't spend years and years of planning it, because even the best planned trip is gonna go to shit.
Yep, I agree with that. And you're gonna, and no matter what, like your first time, you're gonna mess up so many things, and just you need to learn by doing it. I mean, that's the biggest takeaway. I think what you guys are saying, and I completely agree with, is just doing it. I did a talk here recently at a wild game dinner in Michigan about planning a hunt with it, and I ended the whole thing with saying you just got to do it. And it's funny, your budget is just about exactly what I came to find with mine too, is anywhere from $1,500 to $2,000, depending on what you wanted to spend on gear, is what you can expect. And if you break that down, I don't want to throw off the numbers here, but it was like, say, $150 a month if you wanted to save for 1 year, or 2 years, $83 a month. But anyways, if you look at that and you break it down, it's like, all right, so say you're at a point where you need another vehicle, you need something different. If you buy a truck that's, say, 3 years old versus one that's brand new, you still have a super reliable vehicle, but I can promise you your payment is going to be at least $150 a month cheaper than that brand new truck. And it all depends on, what you want to make a priority in your life to do it. And it doesn't take a whole lot. I mean, don't get me wrong, $1,500 to $2,000 isn't something to shy away. It's not just pocket change, but it's doable. And I would argue it's doable for anybody, as long as you just got to plan for it, and you can do it in a year.
It's funny that you bring up driving or not buying brand new rigs. I think Travis and I both drive 10-year-old rigs.
Yeah. I remember seeing your guys' truck. You had that big Ford at the trailhead there, and I remember seeing the Washington plates.
So that truck was a 2003. I recently upgraded a little bit to a 2007.
Dang. No, I don't know. That you're exactly right, man. It's and you maintain those vehicles and everything else, and that's a whole nother topic. But it comes down to, again, your priorities and what you want. If you want to be able to hunt elk every year or do anything like that, you can do it. You can do it with a family. You can do it with kids. And I'm speaking, out of turn by saying that, but I'm sure you guys can, support me here and drag me out of people yelling at me saying I don't know, because I don't have those responsibilities at the moment. But
and just to kind of parlay a little bit on something Scott said on the end is, your trip can go to shit, and that's one thing too that, I don't want to speak out of turn with you either, but you and I have talked about this a little bit, but it's okay. These trips are hard, and the success is not guaranteed, even when you're in a high probability unit, and it's okay to fail on these trips. I mean, some of our greatest failures have been some of our greatest trips. I mean, opportunities that you've blown. I mean, that's what makes a story awesome. And of course, it would have been significantly better if you would have knocked the bull down or and whatnot. But at the same time, I mean, those are all worthwhile experiences as well.
Yeah. No, you're exactly right, and it comes down to looking at it ahead of time. If you're looking at, okay, what are my goals going into this hunt, or what do I want out of this experience? Do you want to have just that, an experience, or do you want a trophy class bull? If you're looking to just go there for to cross it off the bucket list for a trophy class bull, then I'd probably recommend saving money and go with an outfitter. But if you're looking to truly have that experience, you just gotta go and figure it out and deal with the things that happen, and be able to laugh about it afterwards. It might not be as funny in the moment, but you gotta kind of go in with that attitude, in my opinion.
I think that's actually the definition of type 2 fun, isn't it?
It is.
Stuff that sucks at the time, but makes for good stories.
Yep, that's my favorite type of fun. And it's my favorite type of fun, again, afterwards to talk about.
I was probably in my teens when I don't know if someone told. I feel like it was some mentor type for me that told me this, and but I've held on to it and really tried to embrace it and live it every day. Is that when I'm old and broken and my knees don't work and my back is just busted, all I'm going to have left is my stories. And I don't want to be an old man without stories.
Yeah. Oh, I know. I know from like me just listening to my grandfathers talk and everything and what they've done in their life. I'm like, I want to be like that. Like, I don't want to be, a guy that doesn't have anything cool to be able to tell my grandkids. I want to live a life that's fulfilled from that stuff. And most of those good stories come from bad experiences,
Wait, come on, say it, though. Bad decisions?
Team bad decisions. That's what it is. Yep, that's exactly right. Oh man, it's just so true. And Matt Comment, who I had on the second episode of this podcast, I've referenced this, enough times that people that have been listening to for a while have heard me say it. But he was like, you buy a vehicle, and all it does is, depreciate value. Every day it's losing value. When, memories of these experiences and stuff, they just appreciate over time. They get greater. And I think if something that I try to reflect on is hearing him say that and putting that, as a priority in my life to focus on experiences rather than, the material items. But yeah, so that's cool. And so to wrap up, like your first experience going out there and everything, were you guys successful on your first trip?
Yeah, no, this is definitely, I guess, my story to tell. So on our first trip, Scott did not draw his bow back, but I let 3 arrows go on our first trip. And the very first morning, I had an opportunity at a bull, and he stepped through an opening that I was not anticipating, and I shot, and my yardage was off, and my arrow dove in at his feet and was buried in the dirt. And over the course of the next 6 days, we experienced a lot of adversity. We were in the tent for over 30 hours during a storm. Elk disappeared and dried up. And on the very last day, I was able to get on an elk, and we had met up with 2 other guys. We call them California because obviously they're from California. And we didn't know them before we got there. We ended up camping together with these guys, and we shared our whiskey, which is the universal friendship maker. And we ended up hunting with them, and me and his name was Trevor. We had worked around on a corner, and we ended up catching a whole herd of elk, and they were coming right at us. And
let me interject before this turns into the actual hunt story. So we split up to try and kind of change up the dynamic. So Travis and Trevor hunted together, and Nate and I hunted together.
Yep. And so
Trevor, real low key, funny guy. Nate, like borderline professional endurance athlete.
He does like with those like 500-mile races or 1,000-mile bike races or something like it. It's pretty crazy. So
for the listeners out there that don't understand this, I'm a fat kid. I got a pretty strong mental game to get through the woods, but I am a fat kid at heart. I will crush a family bag of chips.
Oh, so you got the short end of the stick, Scott.
I wasn't hunting with Nate. That was not.
I am absolutely dying to keep up with him all day long. And we've been in Colorado for 6 days at this point. Like, your legs are pretty steeled up, and he is just an animal in the mountains. Anyway, back to Travis's sad story.
So anyway, I was able to sneak into the middle of this herd, and to be honest, to this day, I still don't know what happened. But I stuck a bull, and I hit him back. And so I tried to get another arrow in him, and it was back again. He jumped the string, and so he had gone up on a rise. And I was pretty green to elk hunting, and I made a pretty big mistake that I think a lot of veterans would never have made. Is when he went up on the rise, there was a couple different huge sweeping draws that left there, and I was going to try to see which direction he was going. Well, what ended up happening was he had bedded down up on that knob up there. And he was going to die on that knob in probably 5 or 6 hours, and I bumped him off that knob. And when you do that on a liver or a gut shot, they will typically run for miles. And so we ended up looking 4, 5, 6 hours a day past last blood, and we never found that bull. And that was a pretty emotionally draining moment on the mountain after having so many opportunities, and I haven't even delved into how many other opportunities we screwed up without even drawing our bow back. But to have it all come, yeah, I mean, we had that all come down on the last day, and when I shot the bull initially, I mean, he was only at 31 yards, and he had went down. He went and laid down immediately, and I thought he was dead. And so to go from that high to the low hours later was a emotionally difficult thing to process, and it took me a long time to come back to terms with that, and just understand that while it doesn't make it better, those mistakes happen, and the only thing you can do from them is to just really learn from them and try not to make them again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, if you hunt any animal with a bow long enough, you have those type of experiences, and like you said, you just got to learn from them, going forward, and I'm sure that won't be the last one that happens to. I hope it's not, but those type of things do tend to happen with bow hunting, that's for sure. But especially after that many days of hunting and everything else, I'm sure you were in the lowest of lows.
Yeah, it was pretty tough. So,
gotcha.
Along that same hunt, I made a ton of rookie mistakes, like calling when. I mean, we both did that we didn't touch on earlier in the week. Calling when we shouldn't have, or when we should have just tried to ninja, or like I had a couple reeds with me on the trip, but I only had one with me, and I'm colorblind, and I dropped a green reed in the grass, and it was lost to the world. And then I needed one about 5 minutes later. I mean, just tons of things.
Yeah. Yeah, it's when you're talking about dropping the reed, just even this last year, when I was in Colorado, I was with a group of guys, and they moved in on this bull, and it was a 7x5 came in, and I'm watching from the other side of the creek, and the bull was at like 12 yards from them, but it was in the oak brush, and they couldn't get a shot, and they kept, the bull kept going back. And what happened, I could have helped them if I wouldn't have, I dropped my pack a little ways back and kind of ran up, and I forgot my bugle tube, and I was just like, I felt terrible because I felt like I screwed it up because I didn't, have that there to, so then, the elk might have come past them rather than, with them calling, the bull was kind of pinpointing where the sound was coming from. So that was, a difficult thing. It's a learning, a learning experience, I guess. But I think that's what draws me back to hunting over and over and over, is it's a constant learning experience. Every time I step out the door for a hunt, we learn something. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't matter the species or the season or whatever. It's a continual learning process, and mistakes are constantly made. Yeah. No, and I mean, even with whitetails, I've grown up hunting my entire life. I screw up every single year, and I learn, more and more every single time. And like you said, that's what draws you back. If you were able to, master it, it wouldn't be something that just keeps bringing you back. I know with me, I'm addicted to just trying to learn and get better at things. And I've found that with most people that are obsessed with hunting and everything, we all have those similar traits, But
yeah, no, I would agree with that.
Yeah. So to kind of transition here a little bit, guys, something, is something big that you guys have been working on here recently, and I think big is even an understatement, is you're releasing a book.
Yeah, Travis wrote a book.
A book. Travis, what made you decide to write a book?
It wasn't supposed to be a book. That was never the original goal, which I think is what makes it so good. Is Scott had came to me and he said, it would be really great if our grandkids, like when he was talking there, when they're old and broken, or when we're old and broken, if they could look back and say, their grandpa was a badass, and why don't you try to write down your stories? Because I've always been a writer. I ended up graduating college with an English degree and then promptly not using it, and so I've always kept doing that, and it's always been a hobby. And so I sat down and started writing a collection of our stories, but they didn't really come together that way. They came together as something a little bit different. And the more I wrote, and the more Scott and I talked, and we started revisiting our trips and reflecting on them, the more the story of us really kind of came to be. And so the book is Team Bad Decision: An Evolutionary Tale in Backcountry Hunting. And it's not just a collection of hunting stories. It's a collection of, I like to call it a self-deprecating adventure tale wrapped in a do-it-yourself book. And it's supposed to be a fun read for an individual to learn how we hunted the backcountry and how not to do things, because we screwed up a lot. And I try my best to be as honest as possible in describing some of the failures we had. And sometimes today, especially in this high standard social media world where people don't like to talk about failure and whatnot, I think it's important that people talk about the stuff that is not talked about or not admitted to. It took me a long time before I told somebody, besides people who were there, about that bull in Colorado. And the more I talked to people, the more they came out with their own stories of failure and how they had never talked about them. And so, that's not supposed to make it okay, but it's supposed to be something that you can take and you can learn from. So.
Yeah. And so you had asked me in their middle of summer last year if I wanted to, read the chapters as you were writing them and, provide feedback and everything. And immediately as I was reading it, I got, it was so relatable to me from, still being a green, hunter when it comes to, going out of state and doing things like that. It's just an awesome book. Like it's things like if you've done these type of hunts, you're like, man, that that happened to me, but you don't see that stuff come across social media feeds or anything else. These little blips of information that you're getting in an almost unrealistic world where everything seems super happy and I guess for lack of better terms, just seems like everything's perfect. You know what I mean? And I think that's why I was so pumped to read it. And I kept getting into the chapters as you were reading, as you were sending them over and everything. And I got lost a little bit when I went on my elk hunt when I can't remember what chapter it was around that I wasn't able to give you the feedback right away. But it was super cool for me to be able to read that. And I think it's even relatable to someone who's never hunted like that, and to be able to learn from it and realize that it is okay, that you're going to make mistakes, and to kind of have those expectations.
And even more so, I don't want to give the impression that the book is full of failure, because it's certainly not. But something that I try to highlight, not only in my book, but I write a blog occasionally too, and I wrote a blog piece called the 1%, and the premise behind it is that everything that people focus on is 1% of the hunt. They focus on the kill, right? I mean, that's where you get your grip and grin pictures, and that's what people put on their wall and whatnot. But it's everything else that makes that hunt so great. I mean, if we just wanted meat, we can go to the grocery store. We can go buy a grass-fed cow. It's the experience of hunting and everything that comes with it that makes it worthwhile. And that's where the real memories come from. I mean, if I was to describe some of my top moments while I was in a hunt, sure, there's some pretty powerful moments where we were successful. Scott's bull comes to mind. A couple of bear kills come to mind. But there's so many other little nuanced stories that really bring life to your hunt, and those are the memories that stick with you for a long time.
Oh yeah, and just to to say to you, and I told you this through just messaging back and forth, but that article, that 1%, was well written, and I would highly recommend people check it out. I'll include a link to your blog in the show notes here. But it was really well written, and when it's again one of those things that you might reflect on yourself, but it's not something that's talked about in a world of outdoor writing. That's a lot of tips and tactics and things like that, and it was a lot deeper than that. So I thought that was a really well written article.
Awesome. And to be honest, Bill, I'm really excited for you to take a look at the finished piece, because it really has. Scott can comment, because he's been there every step of the way and helping me do final proofreading the last couple of days. But it's come a long way, and it's a really nice polished piece of work. And I'm to be honest, I'm super proud of it.
That's awesome, as you should be. I'm excited to get to see the final touches on it and get to read it from beginning to end and do that. And I hope that everyone else gets to check out the book and do it, because like I said, it's different. I've got into reading a lot of books, and unlike you, I do not have a writing background, which I'm glad you brought that up, that you said you had an English degree in college, because I was wondering, I'm like, how did you learn to write? But with me, I just kind of fumbled through my words and just took my scrambled brain of thoughts and just put them on paper. But it's a very well written book from that perspective too.
I appreciate those words.
Yeah, no problem. But and yeah, it's a fun read too. Like, so it's informational and you can learn a lot from it, but it's just a fun, I caught myself laughing a few times when you guys are talking about when you're drinking whiskey and everything else, and just having fun, through the whole thing.
I feel like it's a very realistic account of what it's like to actually hang out with us.
Which is scary.
And Scott and I were just talking the other day, and there's a story in there that I actually don't know if you've read this, so maybe it'll be a nice surprise for you. But I can't tell you how many times I've revising and revisions and stuff. It's countless number of times that I've read through this, and I still find myself laughing at this one particular story. And to be honest, we were on a hunting trip, but we didn't have any opportunities. But the for lack of a better word, the shenanigans that happened leading up to us even getting into the location is probably one of the funniest things that I've ever encountered. And not at the time. This was very type 2. But yeah, I'm excited for you and for your listeners to take a read. So
yeah, man, I'm really pumped about it, and again, it made me realize that I'm scared at the time when either we get to hunt together or just hang out, because I think it could get a little western.
It's okay. You've been hungover before.
Yeah. Not at 12,000 feet. Oh man, that's great. But yeah, is there anything else that Travis, you want to cover on the book side of things, and kind of give the listeners some information on the release of it, and where they can find that information?
Yep. So I think we talked the show will probably air early April, and it'll be pretty close to the release date. We're looking at an April 6th release date, and kind of like we talked about earlier, we're on schedule for that deadline. So right now, I do have pre-release open on my website, which is www.teambaddecision.com, and the pre-order is available for the paperback, as well as the Barnes & Noble and Apple book. Amazon doesn't allow a pre-order, and so if you're a Kindle reader, then you're going to have to catch that on the release date of April 6th. But all those links are going to be through my website as well.
Okay, cool. I'll find them, and like I said, I'll add those in the show notes as well, so it's easier for people to be able to find that and check it out. So, and like I said, just from the standpoint of I've got to read most of it, as it was going through revisions, and I haven't seen the final product yet, but I'm super excited about it.
Awesome. Yeah, no, I'm pretty pumped too. So like we kind of talked about, this has been such a big project, and and it's pretty surreal that we're so close to the end.
You know, one of the things that I haven't really talked with anyone about that is kind of an interesting thing throughout the book is Travis starts out writing it, and obviously he's a writer, and it's fine, but you get to see his progression as a photographer. There's lots of pictures in the book. Early in the book, there's only pictures of like landscapes, animals, and Travis. And then somewhere around 2015, maybe 2016, you start to actually see pictures of me in the book because Travis has finally learned how to take a photograph.
Oh, that's funny. Oh. Well, at least you got your, claim to fame, Scott, and he, included you in there. That was nice of him.
Well, I might have wrote the book, but I'll tell you what, man. My memory is for shit, and Scott did a really good job. I mean, even now, we're up to Judgment Day here, and he's still like, you still haven't changed this. This still isn't exactly right. You know what I say exactly right? Like, somebody brought a certain tent brand, and I got it mixed up with another tent brand, or something like that. I mean, like really small details, but Scott's minutia of memory has been extremely important in helping me write this book as accurately as possible. So.
That's good. That's cool. So yeah, everyone, like I said, definitely check that out, and hopefully they'll purchase the book and check it out because like I said, I'm really excited to get to read it from beginning to end and hold the book in my hands. So, is there anything else that you guys would like to add as some like finishing thoughts here?
If you like photography, we've also got an Instagram page, st_team bad decision. As Scott said, Scott likes to take a lot of pictures, and I'm slowly getting better. But you can see some other kind of stuff on there, and like I said, thanks for having us on, man. I mean, this has been a lot of fun, and we've been talking about this conversation. I mean, before the book, and we were talking about getting together and talking about elk hunting and bear hunting and whatnot, and I'm glad we were able to make that happen. So,
yeah, no, and appreciate your guys' support, with the podcast and just everything else. Like I said, from last year, I mean, you guys were my lifeline as far as, when I was elk hunting. It was funny when I would get service even on the mountain, I got messages from you guys both like, what's the update? What are you doing? Where are you getting into elk, or what's going on? And it was just funny to go back and forth, and it was, a lot of help. You're like, check out this spot, check it here, and it's great to be able to have, those resources, and I hope to be able to return the favor on that someday.
As kind of a final closing thought that can be very helpful to kind of a reiteration and just kind of a revisit of the thought process for the veteran hunter and for the new guy. It is so easy to get to a point in the hunt where all you want to do is be home. It's hard. It's the weather or other hunter pressure or lack of animals. It's so easy to talk yourself off the mountain, and leaving is always the easier choice. But it's not 5 hours down the road or 3 days back at home. All you're going to want to do is be back on that mountain.
Yeah.
And it takes such a small thought that you kind of let get in, and all of a sudden it seems like the better choice to bail. And we cover this in the book pretty well because we've got some trips that we did early together that really feel like unfinished business, and we would really like another crack at them.
Mm-hmm. And that's some really good advice. I mean, I can promise you, again, from my perspective, that no matter what, you will hit that point when you start doing some of these, Western hunts or out-of-state hunts or whatever it may be. You will hit a point, even if you're hunting in your home state, where you just want to quit and throw in the towel. But you will, especially when you're, again, driving across the country or whatever, as soon as you get in that truck and you're, part way across from, us coming from the east, you're on Interstate 80 or 70 heading east again, you're going to be like, shit, I really wish I would have stayed that extra day or didn't come out, that early.
Well, and that's the thing. You talk about the extra day, and there's a weird weaving on the psyche. You say you give yourself 10 days on an elk hunt, and you start getting in there, and you're seeing how many days it takes, or how many hours it takes you to get around. You need to be home Sunday. You start thinking about, well, I plan to hunt till Saturday and then drive home, but if I kill an elk Friday, I don't know if I can get it back to the truck Saturday to be home Sunday, so I might as well just pack out Thursday. Like, you got to hunt every day you give yourself.
Yep, you'll figure it out. If you come to that situation, you kill in the last hour, you'll figure it out. But
don't talk yourself out of it early.
Yeah, nope. I think that's a really good takeaway, Scott. I appreciate that.
And the only reason I know this is because we've done it.
yeah, and so have I. That's why I'm thinking of like my first hunt when we packed out at like noon. We were supposed to hunt till dark, that day or whatever, and we packed out at noon, and that's all we could talk about on the, as we were hiking back to the truck. All we could think about was cold beer and pizza, and we were super pumped for that. And then on the way home, all we could think about is getting back out there because we just wanted another, chance at it.
That's all it takes is one more opportunity.
Yep. And those opportunities, as many times as it can be talked about is, it only takes that one moment. It is so true. But all right, guys. Well, hey, I really appreciate you coming on here and talking with me and setting some time out of the busy schedule here with the book release and everything else, family. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Bo.
Thank you, Bo.
All right, guys, we'll talk soon.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of East Meets West Hunt with your host, Bo Martonic. For more great content and to stay up to date, visit eastmeetswesthunt.com, Facebook at East Meets West Outdoors, and Instagram at East Meets West Hunt. If you enjoyed today's episode, please review and subscribe, and we'll catch you next time.